For 19 a.m., Minnesota, a campus in darkness, a narcotics network beneath it, heroin fentanyl cache before dawn, movement traced through Omar's district. What looked like a campus was a gateway into a network built on drugs, money, and fear. Let me show you. At 4:19 a.m., the city slept, but the threat did not. Federal analysts had traced a narcotics network moving through the corridor tied to Congresswoman Omar's district. Cash drops, late-night movements, and encrypted messages linked to heroin and fentanyl. The viral threat wasn't noise anymore. It was proof the network was already in motion. If you believe investigations like this should never be ignored, hit like so more people can see the truth. Minnesota Representative Omar recently stated that one of her relatives was confronted by ICE agents in Minnesota. However, this incident appears to be part of a wider sequence of events that began after a viral social media post made by a Somali student who issued a violent threat against ICE agents. A Somali student named Hassan Mohammed didn't just make an outburst. He filmed himself declaring that if ICE agents came into his neighborhood, he would track them down and shoot them. His voice was calm, deliberate, and unsettling. The kind of threat that sounded rehearsed rather than impulsive. I actually heard you guys pull up to Otana, the big O. Hey, you pulled up when I was not there. Oh, so puss boy. You get popped next time I see you, ass. Bring the whole cavalry. Within hours, the video spread across TikTok and X, amplified through private channels until it reached federal monitoring units. At a time when threats against immigration officers had surged over 8,000%, including messages targeting agents' homes and families, nothing was dismissed as online anger. Every word was reviewed as operational intent. His later apology meant nothing. The threat had already crossed a line, and it triggered the first phase of a much larger federal response. If you think threats like this should always be taken seriously, comment alert to let the algorithm push this story further. Once the federal command approved the operation, the response moved with precision. ICE, DEA, and local police formed a single tactical unit. Just over 30 agents assigned to locations already tied to past investigations and unresolved warrants. Hassan Mohammed's threat didn't create the risk. It simply accelerated an operation already on alert. Before sunrise, a line of black SUVs moved quietly into University District. 6 entry teams advanced in silence. Doors were knocked once, then breached. Flashlights swept across narrow corridors as rooms were cleared in seconds. From behind windows, students watched agents enter dorms and rental units that had been monitored for months. Inside one apartment, agents recovered 9 phones and altered IDs. Another concealed $74,000 behind a ventilation panel. A third revealed something darker. A coded contact list linked to federal narcotics suspects. By sunrise, 14 individuals were detained, and the network hidden beneath the campus was no longer in the shadows. When investigators began opening the seized devices, a different truth emerged, one far more serious than immigration violations. The data revealed a systematic narcotics network operating quietly behind the campus. Messages, audio notes, and transaction logs pointed to repeated deliveries of heroin, fentanyl, and synthetic chemicals, all coded under harmless labels like books, supplies, or midnight drops. One folder contained a spreadsheet with 58 recorded shipments, each marked with weight symbols investigators recognized as drug quantities. Another phone held photos of Federal Raid authorized vacuum-sealed packages, the kind commonly used to store narcotics before long D-distanciation transport. Several notes mentioned the quarry, a location that appeared on 3 devices, always tied to late-night activity. GPS data confirmed it. Multiple suspects had traveled again and again to an abandoned industrial zone known unofficially as the Quarry Base, a place long rumored to be used by smugglers. Every thread led back to one name, ABD Rahman Khalif Noor, 42. Noor had prior links to interstate drug routes, and financial records on a laptop showed deposits totaling over $410,000 within 6 months, far beyond legitimate income. His messages coordinated pickup times, quantities, and runners responsible for moving drugs in small batches to avoid detection. Files also revealed a rotating chain of safe houses, burner phones, and detailed maps of distribution paths across Minnesota and 2 neighboring states. The suspects on campus weren't simply hiding. They were part of a structured narcotics operation, using the university as protective shield. By the time agents finished reviewing the evidence, one fact was undeniable. This was a drug network with leadership, logistics, and reach, and it was still fully active. If you're still watching at this point, type expose in the comments so this investigation reaches more people. The path to the Quarry Base had been forming for days. Every phone seized, Every GPS log, every coded message pointed to the same place, a forgotten industrial zone outside Minneapolis, surrounded by broken concrete, rusted fences, and a silence that felt unnatural. To most people, it was just an abandoned warehouse. To investigators, it was the heart of the network. Just after 4 a.m., the operation began. A convoy of unmarked SUVs moved slowly down the narrow road, leading into the complex. The headlights were dimmed. The radios were silent, except for coded whispers. 42 federal agents, ICDA, and tactical units took positions around the perimeter. Their faces were calm, but their grips tight. Intelligence suggested that weapons were stored inside, and that some members of the network had cartel-level connections. No one knew how the night would end. At 4:27 a.m., a small drone lifted into the air, scanning the warehouse roof and side entrances. Heat signatures appeared. At least 7 people inside. One figure stood in the central room, barely moving. The shape matched the height and build of Abdul Rahman Khalif Noor. Entry teams ready. A voice muttered through the radio. The breach began with a single controlled detonation. The metal side door shook, then fell outward with a burst of dust. Flashlights sliced through the darkness. Team 1 swept to the left wing, stacked crates, torn tarps, and the sour chemical smell of narcotics processing. Team 2 pushed toward the central hall, moving steadily under the cover of heavy shields. Then came the first confrontation. 2 suspects burst out from behind a stack of pallets, attempting to flee through a side exit. Agents shouted commands. Stop! Federal agents! But the men didn't comply. One reached into his jacket. In seconds, agents fired 2 BNAG rounds, knocking both suspects to the floor. They were handcuffed and pulled aside as the operation pushed forward. Inside the warehouse's core, something more alarming appeared. Metal containers filled with heroin, fentanyl precursors, and equipment capable of preparing hundreds of doses per hour. This wasn't storage. This was production. The final room was sealed with reinforced lock. It took nearly a minute to break through. When the door swung open, agents found Kifno sitting at a metal table, a phone in his hand. 3 more lined up beside him. No chaos, no resistance. He simply lifted his head, as if he had been expecting them. Around him were $260,000 in cash rubber banded into bricks, 15 handguns and 3 rifles in open cases, ledgers detailing shipments across 3 states, a map distribution, route traced with red marker. For a moment, the room stood still. The storm was over. Nur was handcuffed without a word. His network campus sweep begins had collapsed in a single night. What began with a viral threat had now exposed a narcotics base operating in the shadows of Minnesota. And the man who quietly ran it was finally in federal custody. If you support federal agents risking their lives to dismantle networks like this, hit like and share this chapter forward. When the lights inside the quarry base were finally switched on, agents realized the raid had only ended the first half of the story.